Ben Hitchcock Cross talking to you today. I'm going to do a commentary or a reaction to the recent Milwaukee Public Schools board meeting held on Tuesday. So we're going to go through that here, and I've got a few themes that I want to talk about beforehand. First and foremost, I think we're going to see this board's reaction to criticism. We're going to see, hopefully, the individual board members' reactions there. I think that the cameraman here for MPS's cameraman is playing some games, so it's difficult to tell. But I was at the hearing, so I know what happened, and hopefully I can provide some inside information on that, where we weren't able to see the actual reaction of the board members and so forth. So that's the first point. The second point is the abject failure of Bob Peterson. I really feel that the mask came off. You could see him just mean mugging someone. There's a parent there that was trying to explain to him how she felt about the failures that the board of the board and the administration in reacting to the bullying of her son. And you can really see here that just through their facial gestures and their response, how they feel about that kind of information being put before them, being confronted with their own actions. But also, again, was Bob Peterson's chance to stand up and do something here. And if anything, it's clear to me from being there as a spectator if anything, he is protecting the administration even more than he was before. And you can see that viscerally in his face, in his reaction, in his body language there. We had hopes for you, Bob Peterson. We still do, but it's not looking good. It sure isn't. So much for Bob Peterson, I guess, is the best you can say. He knows that he's clearly feeling the heat, and he should. He ought to be ashamed of himself. He's an absolute failure. So, moving on from that I think the next biggest theme that we're going to look at is gobbledygook. There sure is a lot of gobbledygook that's going to be passed around here at this board meeting. I'm sure many of you know it much better than I. And some of it, I call it educator ease. Some of that is going on. There's the new buzzwords of equity and so forth. And I don't have any problem with any of those concepts. I just think that people are deluding themselves to think that this is anything other than new ideas with old ideas, rather, with new packaging, which is fine. But the problem is that when you continually dress up an idea, and that's going to be another thing that's going to come up here. You see their 5-year plan, their 3-year plan, and so forth. Just reinventing new words for the same concepts inevitably means that you haven't fixed the problem to begin with. So in some sense, that's people, the PhD mills have to put out these PhDs, and they've got to come up with new words and pretend like they've, invented the sun again. Well, I don't think that's the case. And I think that, there was a parent there that I think said it better than anybody, and certainly than I could, which is there's nothing wrong with our black and brown children. The problem is with the administration. And so that I think says it all to me. So this is nominally going to be on disproportionality and discipline outcomes and activities. And really what that means is the statistics don't lie, okay? And it's clear that across the board that white children are getting help at a higher rate, and black children are getting disciplined at a higher rate, okay? And that correlation, I can tell you, is in almost every it's cultural. It's part of what's going on here. So there's no question that you'll find this in law enforcement, you'll find this in education, you'll find this all across the board in government services. The trend here, documented by research, is that white people are getting help and black people are getting hurt. Okay? So again, white people and black people are probably broader concepts here, and we can drill down deeper into that. But that's what we're talking about when we're saying disproportionality. So if the hard data tells the federal government and others that black children are being disciplined at a disproportionate rate than white children. So many different districts have different ways of dealing with that because the federal government says we're not going to give you school districts more money if you don't solve this problem. So some districts just stop doing statistics. Others just stop disciplining kids. Some come up with gobbledygook. Some do a combination of all three and more besides, I'm sure. So that's what we're going to look in here is you have to ask yourself whenever you're talking, you're watching these professionals speak is do you understand the words that are coming out of their mouths? Do you believe that they understand the words that are coming out of their mouths? And what would those words mean? And is this something new or not? Those would be the questions that I would be asking myself and going to be asking myself when we look at this here. So enough of me. Hopefully, here we go.
I pledge allegiance to the flag.
And we're going to skip through most of this. I think we'll just try to go to Ms. Zerda Palmer here to start.
Previously, a high school elective course that is also part of our implementation process for high schools. And
So
I'm sorry,
who's speaking here is this lady here. I'm sorry.
My team intentionally took time to develop what our department values, vision, and mission are using a collaborative and restorative process that centered the voices of my coaches and the ones who are invested in and doing this work in schools, the MPS Restorative Practices team.
All right, and I can just tell you, I have no idea what we center relationships, healing, dignity, justice, joy, and trust in schools means. I have no idea. Even with her trying to explain it to me now, I have no idea. So I just want to be clear on that concept going from there. And again, I'm not trying to belittle liberal ideals. I'm trying to belittle wrapping a patina of liberal ideas with nonsense. That's what I'm trying to do. These guys are not, there's no commitment at all to the core of this concept. They are just trying to hold out a fig leaf here to say that we've checked the box in terms of this.
And we are working to model with one another what we work to accomplish within our schools. Our values are that we center relationships. That is at the heart of healing, dignity, justice, joy, and trust that we are looking to build.
Still don't know what
Our
that means.
vision for restorative practices is a liberated educational community where everyone is celebrated for who they are, feels a strong sense of connection and belonging, and responds to conflict and discomfort as an opportunity to repair, strengthen, and heal the community.
All right, so I don't know how far we are into this, but let's just see if any of those statements describe Keith Posley's treatment of Deb Keither, just for example. Okay, so do we think that Deb Keither was being celebrated for who she was? Do we think that she and the, let's say, curriculum and instruction team felt a strong sense of connection and belonging? Let's just go to the Saffold deposition for that one. Do you think that MPS responded to Deb Keither's complaints as an opportunity to repair, strengthen, and heal the community?
We are working to do this by being deliberate about dismantling educational systems and structures that historically and continue to oppress our Black and brown communities.
I don't know what that means, and sounds a little bit alarming here, and but you know, I'm absolutely what alarming about that means is I'd like to hear more precision about what exactly that concept means, because I could see that meaning anything. The concept of getting rid of oppressive systems against Black and brown communities is certainly laudable.
Transform educational culture using a continuum of restorative practices that we will share tonight. And these practices build inclusive communities founded on shared values that celebrate all cultures and identities.
Continuum is one of those buzzwords
to accomplish
to me,
this
red
vision and
flags.
mission, we're working
As
to
soon as I
find
hear
new
it,
ways
I'm
of operating and putting emphasis
skeptical.
on why and how we educate our young people. This slide represents the continuum of restorative practices that showcases what elements exist within a restorative school community. Our team has been developing training and coaching around these core elements for schools. As my coach, Lakeisha Russell, would describe, at the center of this continuum is the heart of the work. Racial justice and equity beats throughout each practice. Without courageous conversations about race and equity PD, we would not have been able to get to the place we are currently.
What does that mean?
If you move from the center to the top of the continuum, that is where the practice begins. It starts with cultivating a restorative mindset.
And so again, what I want to understand is why they think they're at a better place today than they were before. You know, I've seen some of this. If you go back in the presentation, there's other slides here about different levels of fewer expulsions, I think is the core of the concept here. And while absolutely laudable, I'm not sure that they're getting there, but with this system by any means. Again, because of the gobbledygook. So now we're going to turn, I think, to Zerda Palmer here, and we'd like to hear what she's going to say about her middle school. I can tell you that you know, I've got big concerns about her and her use of the police against MPS employees. Just from my very little knowledge of that, I've got some concerns here. But let's see what she has to say.
Is where the staff at Douglas have worked diligently to improve outcomes. The next slide represents some of the strategies that we as a staff have put in place this school year. However, I will focus on two areas where we have had the largest decreases in our suspensions. While decreasing all incidents of all kinds right now is the goal of every school administrator. However, we wanted to be very purposeful around specific actions. We wanted to be specific around actions that would impact specific behaviors. For example, we wanted to address physical altercations between students. Our trauma support specialist created a mediation request Google form. This form is accessed by all staff members.
Let's go back to that for 1 second. I don't know what triggered that, but certainly they didn't want to see that. Let's just go see what the public has to say here.
Wanted to be specific around actions that would impact specific behaviors. For example, we wanted to address physical altercations between students. Our trauma support specialist created a mediation request Google form.
Yeah, that's probably us reacting to a Google form. All right.
This form is accessed by all staff members, teachers, paras, safety, secretaries, and administrators. If there is any
They hit the wrong
indication
key.
that an incident may occur, staff are able to input information to request mediation services. This Google form has been wonderful for us at Douglas in that if there is any indication that an incident will occur, information is written down. Again, this Google form has worked really well for us because all disagreements between students are not overt with loud arguing and posturing. Sometimes students may plan fights on social media, or sometimes we get a tip from our parents, or sometimes even other students. At Douglas, if we hear something, we say something.
So one thing I would say about a Google form beyond anything else is that it's, about the least secure possible method that you can have to share information. So if they're being asked to have confidential pupil records on Google Forms, especially regarding sensitive issues, as she just described, that might be problematic.
The trauma support specialist, a member of the administrative team, school social worker, school psychologist, parent coordinators all have the ability to facilitate mediations based on urgency, the sensitive nature of the topic, and/or availability of staff. Student IDs are used for data collection in this process, and we have had a decrease of 49 suspensions for fighting compared to last school year. The second
I didn't get what she means by student IDs are collected and used for this process. That just seems troubling to me. But we'll see. And so far, again, she does get marks for being at least coherent. These are all viable strategies that I've seen so far. They don't seem to necessarily be dealing with the heart of the matter, but if you want to stop fights between pupils, I definitely imagine that mediation is going to be a good thing to do that, and to have people who are trained in that be available to help mediate. I don't know what parents and what these others if they're trained or not, but that seems to be helpful.
strategy I would like to highlight from this slide is one that we've used at Douglas to address chronic disruptions. These disruptions most often occur in classrooms. We have implemented the use of calming corners. We wanted to start at the Tier 1 level, which means that all classrooms have a semi-secluded, walled-off space outfitted with a rug, comfortable floor chair or beanbag, coloring books, fidgets, and other manipulatives. Because we want students to remain in the classroom as much as possible, the implementation of calming corners gives students the opportunity to separate and regulate themselves while remaining in the room for instruction. This strategy has proven to be a great intervention, as we have also seen a decrease here of 74 suspensions for chronic disruptions compared to last school year.
It does sound like go sit in the corner with coloring
This
books,
next slide is extremely important,
but
as it
I'm
speaks to the
absolutely
commitment,
open to hearing more.
the teamwork, and support it takes to do this work. First and foremost, the dedicated staff at Andrew Douglas Middle School has done an amazing job with building relationships with students, utilizing the PBIS framework with fidelity, and very recently working as a team to implement a new escorting policy to further mitigate incidents and increase our instructional minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, as referenced by the slide, we also have wonderful community partners that are helping to do this work as well. Miss Glenna and Girls of Color, Jakari Carr, and also Mentor Milwaukee and Lutheran Social Services, to name a few, are some of these partners that are helping us do this work. Additionally,
and what's troubling to me about that is, again, is this all sort of, so there's an escorting policy here, and what I know about that is if they have some known incident, knowledge of danger to a student, then staff members, including teachers, will escort that particular student from one area to another, which is obviously very time-consuming, labor-intensive. So, I mean, that does sound like an actual move. Everything else here, or actual policy that's doing something to protect students that might need that protection, doesn't seem to me to be the most effective. But what I let's put it like that. It's the cheapest, efficient is the word that I'm looking for here. Excuse me. But again, everything else does seem to me to be a window dressing is the word I'm going to use for that. So let's see if they have any questions.
Thank you, administration, for that presentation. And thank you to Ms. Weinbright. I think the team is doing an amazing job at really tying the pieces of what at one point felt a little bit disconnected. So I'm glad to see the progress that has been made on that regard. But yeah, so thank you, Principal Palmer, for sharing the updates on the school. But interested in seeing what committee members wish to make any remarks on what we just heard. Yes, Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. I have a couple questions, but I'll just start. Well, I'll go in order then. Principal Palmer, I wanted to thank you for your presentation. I love hearing about these solutions that maybe we...
Look, let's just get this out of the way. Anytime she makes a sentence that doesn't start with the word I, then let's count that as a point, okay?
wouldn't have thought of, like the mediation requests via Google Forms. Like I just, it wouldn't have been something that I thought of, but hearing it, it makes perfect sense. So
That one in particular is like a double point because she made herself both the subject and the object of the sentence.
I just wanted to thank you and recognizing, like, you may think that a reduction of 49 suspensions for fights doesn't sound like, you may think that you should have had more or something, but I am very pleased to hear this about all of that progress. So thank you very much for that. I think it gives us lots to consider. I did have a question for administration for the restorative practices. So it sounds like you're working with PBIS, the Gender Identity and Inclusion and Violence Prevention and BLMA. So does administration have any, any ways or ideas on how the board can help foster breaking down silos like this and coordinating the work either within central office, or like how do we push it out more to the community?
Administration.
I didn't understand any of that. So the first thing in there was silos, which is, the concept that one part of an organization has information, resources, etc., that is not necessarily sharing with other other parts of the organization. So, for example, data, the file cabinet will be in some department, and another department won't have access to that filing cabinet or virtual file or whatever. Okay, so that's silos. I got that. And then push this out to the community and other schools. But basically what she's saying is, if this stuff works, what do you want us to, what can we do to make this go out to expand these programs? Whew.
Chair Garcia, members of the committee, one of the things that we're doing is trying to, because each one of these groups are small departments, and we are trying to make sure that we have a footprint in all of our schools. So in how we can spread all of this great knowledge out to various schools and locations. The other piece is the idea.
Look, we all know there's a disparity of services, and there's going to be a hierarchy and an order. So let's just keep that in mind with in his answer, that hey, it's going from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. We'll do it in the order that we see fit, according to what schools we like the best and think that deserve it.
Around professional development opportunities, being able to push that out through professional development opportunities so that other school groups and communities can do that.
Mr. Boswell.
We have a monthly Principals Institute where at each one of those monthly principal institutes, the regionals and the ILDs are working with principals on, looking at the toolkit, various different things around the toolkit, looking at how we reduce suspension, some of the best practices, cutting edge things that are out there, and sharing best practices from other schools or what's happening.
So what he's saying is, look, we already have a method to disseminate our orders to the principals and the vice principals, to management in the schools. Okay? So we don't need you messing in that. It goes like this. I get my staff at central office, and they go and have a dog and pony show every month or whatever it is to the principals, and they tell them how it's going to be. And if people don't follow that line, then we have other ways to get them the message through to them.
With other school locations. And then looking at how we can scale this work and being totally transparent around that. John, anything you want to add?
That's not, I mean, those are descriptions of how one does the job that they have. It is not descriptions of the work that they have done or will do.
Members of the committee, John Jagman. I want to add, we also have that district discipline disproportionality leadership team. It's a mouthful, I know, but that team has the supervisor or a member of all those teams that Mariah listed off, that we meet monthly. It is centered around this idea of discipline disproportionality, where sometimes we're in different spaces together talking about different but like that team specifically comes to the table to present what they are doing and how the data kind of reflects in their spaces. And I think it was in the beginning of February, it might have been end of January, we all met, we had a retreat, we called it, where all the coaches of all these teams came and met together to build that community as different departments and specifically talk about looking into next year, how can we build a plan together where we all have our knowledge, our skills present, so the schools are receiving one message. And
You know, with all respect to Mr. Jagman, we're just about to. We're just about to. Let's see if there's any more board members that have anything
About
to say.
race, you listed that 72 sessions have been held. I think the goal, we passed it in 2019. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I think there was a 5-year plan. Do the 72 sessions put us on pace, or do you need something from the board to accelerate the work? It sounds like we now have our own facilitators, so maybe that I've seen the numbers were growing, so I don't know if that means yep, now we're on pace.
Did you do what you said you were
Chair
going to
Garcia,
do?
members of the committee. So yes, the 3-year plan we were specifically looking at was March 1st, 2021, and the 5-year plan did start in 2019. We have a plan to march out the specific groups, we are doing the sessions for facilities and maintenance, which might sound like nothing, but there's 800 staff members in facilities and maintenance. We are doing them in the next 45 days. That's going to add 800 to these numbers. So we are at the point of the numbers are moving up slowly, but we have more capacity as facilitators. We have more capacity in how we're reaching out, and we have, I think, already about 10
so this
sessions
is just that
planned for
magic
May.
sauce theory of, if we just take them to a seminar, then problem solved. So now they're going to take all the buildings and maintenance crew and make them go to Andy Race's training, and then they can scratch that off the list.
In June, once school years end, to really get to those teachers and paraprofessionals. And going into next year, we did it this year. It is a part of New Educators Institute, and it's a part of the 2-day onboarding for paraprofessionals. So going forward, we are meeting teachers and paraprofessionals specifically as they are hired to get in. So we have, I'll be honest, built the numbers up slower, but we have hit that kind of capacity
So
number
no,
where we are going to
failed.
start to see them.
We failed,
quite a
but
bit.
we're working on it. We're about to.
Any other committee members? Director Leonard.
So, Ms. Palmer, just a couple of questions, because I was a middle school teacher forever, and I'm curious, when you first started the classroom calming centers, how did that really go? I'm just curious, because I'm envisioning what I'd went through, and it created a really good relationship with my students, so that was possible. I'm not sure if every teacher is able to do that or not, but I'm curious.
Chair Garcia, members of the committee, Ms. Palmer, principal at Douglas, very good question. So honestly, this is a process that we had to teach to students, in terms of how to treat the materials in the calming corner. There's also a bit of a criteria in terms of why would you go to the calming corner. For example, if a student is very upset, really irate, that's not probably appropriate for the calming corner. So really, my support staff having professional development sessions with staff around what should it look like, how do students access. The very first year, obviously that first semester did not go so well. We were reordering manipulatives and things like that. So we as adults had to take a step back to say, okay,
That means
how can we set
they all
up
got
kids for
record
success?
taken.
And so it
Fair.
became
I
a
mean,
part of like
who
our
wouldn't? Which child among us wouldn't want to go to a quiet corner and manipulate manipulatives as opposed to, doing what is required of them in the classroom? I mean, I have to almost be crazy not to.
CL lessons and how do we use our materials?
Any follow-up?
So they had to be
One more
taught
question.
how
Thank
to
you.
use-
Appreciate
how to
that.
be in the
What is your
quiet
new
corner.
escorting policy? And maybe I wasn't listening, so I apologize.
Because she didn't say.
Chair Garcia, members of the committee, Zerda Palmer, principal at Douglas. So currently, our staff are the ones that are transitioning from room to room versus our students moving from room to room. We looked at some data right before Christmas break, and we know things tend to change before big breaks, and so we started to see some things increasing that we did not like, and so we wanted to be a little bit proactive. It was definitely something that I wanted to do, but got input from staff, my admin team, because obviously they're the ones that have to do the work of moving, so making sure that they bought into that. It was also slated to be a 28-day plan for February, so now we need to start talking about how do we get our kids back out into the hallways.
Anybody out there who works under
transitioning
Zerda
up.
Palmer, I'd love to hear their version
Thank you.
of how that process went.
Director
Buy-in
Taylor.
or something else.
Thank you, Chair Garcia, and thank you for coming, Ms. Palmer. I was gonna ask, and then you talked about how it is the staff that moves from room to room. And I just wanted to know, like, when you say administrative staff, like, who exactly is it? Is it the educators or those, like, SSTs? Because one thing that we've heard all year, or for the last 2 years, is the shortage of staff. So just trying to wonder, how are you configuring that to ensure that it's
You know,
staying
Bob
on track?
Peterson looks terrible.
Principal Palmer.
Chair Garcia, members of the committee, very great question. So obviously a lot of planning went into that. And so while the teachers are set to transitioning, all of the administrative team, principal,
Why is that
assistant
obvious?
principal, dean, any support staff, safety, we're all hands on deck. We all man a
Students affirm
classroom
in
so that
deposition.
teachers are able to get from place to place and students are also supervised.
Follow-up?
No, I just want to say,
Oh,
thank you.
so they have like a security guard come and
visualizing that
watch
for
all
us,
the
'cause a lot of times we
children
hear about a lot of great
while the
things that
teachers
can
move
be
to place
happening,
to
but then
place.
staff kind of becomes the barrier, how we can like efficiently and effectively help our schools. So, thank you for that. Thank you.
Maybe,
Chair Garcia.
stop assaulting them, support them, stop discriminating against them, just for starters.
Director Simpson.
I'm full of ideas here
Guess
today.
I'm going. So first of all, I'd just like to thank Mariah Weingrad for being here tonight. It is nice to have a former colleague from Niskera here on the floor. And really want to thank you for the reporting that you gave on the restorative practices work that you're doing. It's incredibly important. And just reading through the time that you took to develop that values, vision, and mission statement, it's so deep and so meaningful, as well as just that continuum. Like that's a body of work that really has a lot of power and thought behind it. And it was just, I really appreciated that presentation being presented to the board tonight, because I think restorative practices is just an incredibly important piece of that stool that Director O'Halloran was speaking of, where we're all, that's like one leg of it, and it's a really important piece. And also the alignment that
So I got that she thinks that restorative practices are important. Other than that, I haven't understood anything.
happening across those different groups is something that we've felt wasn't really happening, so it's really nice to hear that that's happening. I'd like to thank Principal Palmer for speaking tonight. I was wondering about the transition, and so to hear it's a 28-day plan, I think was really wise. Like, we're going to do this just to kind of calm things down and that you have a plan for moving forward. And just from when you talked about laying the groundwork for the calming corners, you know, it seems like you really have that knowledge base that we have to really lay the groundwork behind the work, what we're doing with our kids, so that it doesn't backfire. So just thanks for the work that you're doing there. I do have one question though for
Thank you.
Jacob. So you talked about the conversations you're having where you're kind of like digging below that iceberg. Is there anything that you can share, some examples of that conversation or how that conversation is structured or will be structured moving forward in terms of digging down? Because that's a piece that I think that's something we've been hearing that we have to do. It's been an ask that's been made by the community. So just wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
Mr. Jagman?
Chair Garcia, members of the committee, John Jagman. So we're following, I'll say, like the lead of Courageous Conversation about race and how they do this with DELT. So this month, they had us just go down the iceberg.
That means that they bought a package from a producer that tells them how to solve racism. So now it's gonna, oh my God.
And then next month, we're gonna come back into that space and we're gonna go back up the iceberg and build it through a more racial equitable lens. So they do it in 3 stages. The first stage is looking at the historical aspect of what's the first thing upholding it. So what's the history of discipline disproportionality in the district and what does that look like? Second.
All right. So an iceberg here, the concept is that there's more under the surface than you see at the top. I like fungus, but way better, but iceberg, fine. Okay. So the point is she's asking him to tell her examples of the conversations or to identify some of those structures that exist under the surface here that have historically served to disproportionately affect black and brown students. What we got is we bought a package and we're going to follow it. I'm kind of done with this. I think we've all got the concept. Let's try to move on here if we can. I guess Bob is going to say something, so let's hear that.
Thank you all 3 presenters. This is really groundbreaking work that we're doing, from breaking silos to building communities in all sorts of ways, and so I appreciate that a great deal. I just had a couple specific questions.
Okay.
One was for Mr. Jagerman. You mentioned the concept of reframing classroom bias through equity. Could you explain what that might look like for a classroom teacher?
Mr. Jagman?
That's a real question.
Chair Garcia and members of the committee. So we looked at it through 2 lenses, and we've been building this idea of bias for 5 or 6 years, where we get in front of staff, and I would say 4 years ago we started it where we identified we all have bias, and we defined bias. We did a lot of work with Dr. Holly. This is bias. The last couple years we've gotten past that and said we all have bias. We live in a racialized world. We intake bias. So we talked about what are some strategies to interrupt bias. If it's in that situation, doing a mindful breath. If it's bigger picture, reading books from authors of various races. If it's going to different parts of the community. So that's what we talked about in terms of bias, of how we as
Have none of those things been tried since like 1975? Take a deep breath. Nobody's done that since 1975. Go out into the community. Nobody's done that. I mean, this is groundbreaking. Come on, people.
an adult in a racialized world
Y'all
in these
need a
spaces
shovel.
interrupt bias when it comes out. Then we also looked at this idea of building our classroom management through a lens of equity. And a lot of this comes from, there's a book called These Kids Are Out of Control by Richard Milner. He calls it that on purpose because it's kind of a provocative title, where he looks at those 4 areas. Positive framing. How do we positively frame the educational experience for all students, all families, all the time? Like, you're going to engage in this, you're going to do great, you're going to be successful. Positively framing all aspects of education. And then classroom community, which I know you keep hearing, but he emphasizes that. How are you building that classroom community? Critical reflective practices.
Look, I mean, and it's a real thing that they've got to overcome. And the way I want to encapsulate it is this. You know, this concept of we as black people are not supposed to be, you know, X, Y, or Z. And one of those things I've often heard is educated, okay? And I think that that phrase in and of itself sort of encapsulates the internalization of white supremacy. There's no doubt about it. Okay? And I do think it's absolutely important that the school boards, school districts, schools, principals, teachers, everyone, parents work together and try to eliminate that culture. Okay? But that is not, let's put it another way. What I think, besides playing whack-a-mole, the concept of what I'm hearing here more than anything else is we're going to put this on the teachers, the parents, and the students, because we're management, and what we do is come up with plans and assign tasks to subordinates. So, I mean, that's kind of a white supremacist way of trying to solve the problem of white supremacy. If you know, I mean, at least it's a corporatist way, and maybe those are all linked. Some might definitely say that. So, I just want to keep that all in mind here, that's why I find these to be so kind of amusing, is because I think in their hearts they all know that this is not going to work, because they're not really addressing what the issue is.
Is the adult looking at their role in classroom management and in the climate of the classroom. You know, it's not, we have a group of students who are very talkative.
Body language
I have a
from
role in that as an
Mosley?
adult. Like, and
Glad
what
you see
structure,
that.
what expectations do I have? So the critical reflective practices. And then the last one he calls is persistent practices, which is a one-on-one correlation with restorative practices of that high accountability, high support. I'm going to hold you to here. If you don't meet it, we're going to have a conversation, but I'm going to support you to get to this level. And so he calls it persistent practices. It's very similar. So those are the 4 areas that we're working with staff to rethink your classroom management, because it looks different in kindergarten than it does in 12th grade. It looks different at Douglas than it does at another school. But looking at your practices through, are you persistent with them? Are you positively framing them? Are you looking at your role in it? And are you building that classroom community?
Follow up?
Yeah, thank you very much.
I don't
My
think it's a problem with teachers.
other
as much as
question has to
management.
do with its restorative practices.
Now, I would think Bob
slide
Peterson would be the one to say
11
that.
rather, and it's
But he doesn't.
described as the cohort schools, and then the coaching and support. And I was wondering if you might be, Ms. Weingrad, if you could describe what happens at cohort schools in terms of the support, and then also who gets and what is in.
Let's get to the real meat and potatoes. Just a little interesting tick here. They had some problems, but it's kind of funny to watch Simpson's head go back and forth. So we're now going to have testimony from the public, and one of these is a frequent commentator from outside. I think she's fantastic. So let's listen up to her.
Hello? Hello, we can hear you, yes.
Why do they have it cut to 2.5 minutes per person? I mean, you look in there, there's 3 people who want to talk. They could let you go on for forever. You know, and just one other thing with that. I think I need to say that my presence there clearly has an effect on how they treat these people. And had I not been there, I think the reaction would have been, you know, near violent.
Hello, can you hear us?
But that's, you know, and that tells you a lot, too, when people's behavior change when they're being watched. That tells you a lot about their sort of
Can you hear us?
self-awareness.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Spell your last name and begin your testimony.
Angela Lucas Foley, Lucas space Foley. Good evening, Chair Garcia, Board of Directors. I come to you this evening as a parent, as a white educator, and a proud member of aspiring anti-racist white educators of Milwaukee. I am here today this evening as I have been before, to make comment on the item before us. Really focusing in on community involvement.
So, just as a, all power to this speaker, I just want to say, as a positive critique here, that she hasn't said anything yet and she's 15 seconds or more into her time. And frankly, I wouldn't even tell them my name. I would just get right into, you guys are failures because. This is what I want you to do because. Bam. You got 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Use every second of it.
As school board directors, how can you involve the community in developing solutions to exclusionary discipline?
Bam, that's where I'd start.
How can you better examine practices and how they are working? As you know, our disproportionate discipline numbers have stayed the same or gotten worse for years.
Mm-hmm. See, but that's the real science.
Where is the
there.
bold action plan with benchmarks that will be demanded by you as school board members?
You can see Bob Peterson's little
Further,
screw face
as the
there.
budget cycle approaches, will you as school board members ensure that the budget is valuing
O'Halloran,
anti-racism,
Simpson, and
culture
Leonard
of all
are
buildings, courageous conversations
Garcia,
about
they're just
race?
otherwise
How
occupied.
will you know these items are valued? Thank you.
Miss Taylor seems like she's listening.
We do
That's-
have two
That's the
speakers.
comment I've been
The
making.
first speaker is,
Why
Deb
aren't you holding
Keefer.
anybody accountable?
please state your name, spell your last name, and begin your testimony.
All right, Deb Keither.
Thank you. My name is Deb Keither, Kuether. Chair Garcia and members of the board. I'm here, we just heard a lot about the shared vision, values, and mission. And we even heard words like joy, culture, transparency. And it's really odd being here and hearing those things when we're sitting right here and you haven't even cared to look at us or come greet us, or you have parents that are here, people that you could be activating. You can't even look at.
So, and you can't see this because they're off screen here, but they're actively not looking at her as she's saying this. They've all got more important things to do. It's the sense that I got from their body language.
The constituents. We have been sitting here and not one person has made eye contact. We are attempting to engage you. Instead, you read your statements like robots.
I understood that Bob Peterson tried to stare down the mom, so that's, discreditable, I guess. But that's at least a form of engagement, so hey.
You mention things like Google Docs and stools. You have policies that have been in existence, or you have plans that have been in existence for 5 years. That's what Ms. Foley just mentioned. It's just paper. It's a wad of paper. You could potentially analyze policy. Director Leonard was onto something when he suggested, oh, maybe we should read that policy we're talking about tonight. That would be a good idea. So you know what language is in there. You could also write standard operating procedures so there is less opportunity for discrimination in policy. You could also juxtapose data against your policy. There's an idea. You could also, this is a stool, but it has more than 3 legs, okay? You can understand, you could look at video footage that you have in your possession of schools that have violence happening.
I want to tell you she's over her time right now. And you could tell that Jackie Mann was really kind of debating what should she do or what should she not. And I do feel that, the last time they cut her off, they did it right on the time here. And it was really way more like gotcha in your face, Debbie. But, they're feeling it a little bit here.
Among students and teachers and adults. Instead, you ignore that. You sweep it under the covers. Yeah, you do that. You have done it. You've done it more than once. It's there. Instead, you want to do a Google Doc. Enough of that. You could also engage the peers. They can talk about video footage. They can talk about police reports. The police reports, have any of you looked at police reports for the schools that you oversee?
That's them cutting her off right there. No. She's.
Madam Chair, the next speaker on this item is Amanda Hanson. Please state your name, spell your last name, and begin your testimony.
Amanda's awesome.
Amanda Hanson, Hanson.
Thank you.
I come before you today as a prior parent of the district to express my plea for change. Administrative Policy 1.013A states, students come first. As a parent, we trust the adults of the district to have our children's best interest at heart and conduct themselves with integrity and morals. These are our precious babies we send into your care. It's common knowledge that long-term bullying can result in serious damage to a young child's psyche. When we bring these things to you on behalf of our children, we're told you'll handle it, and we trust you. This wasn't the case for my son, who suffered greatly from physical and emotional abuse for an entire school year. He was told to end his precious life countless times. He was only 7. A huge portion of that year in silence from fear of retaliation because things weren't being handled as I was being.
So that got their attention now. So now all of them, the politicians out there, not the management, but the politicians, and I'm telling you this because I saw it, are now trying to make eye contact and trying to engage her now.
Told. Not a single act to intervene took place, Director Leonard. In emails, I asked several, if not all of you, before me, what if he had done it? Not a single one of you ever acknowledged it.
So as far as I got from that, she's saying that there are communications between her and board members alerting them of the situation, and they failed to take action. They were deliberately indifferent to the situation. That's exactly what we're talking about here.
Nothing will ever change or fix what my son went through, but it's an urgent plea that you hear me today and understand the risk involved when you ignore these concerns. These are children and their lives are at stake. It is your duty to put them first, so please do so. I beg you all today to uphold your policies and procedures, to conduct yourselves with integrity and hold students and staff accountable that harm others. I beg you to not ignore bullying ever again. Take it seriously right away. Handle these children with compassion and care. They are just little ones, with so much hope in their eyes, capable of amazing things. Protect them before we lose them. We loved that school.
And the problem that all of these directors are facing right now is their hypocrisy. Because they talk about all these things, but when push comes to shove, they don't do anything about that. And then now that they're being called out on it, their internal liberalism is really having a problem. And so that's creating an internal conflict in there. They're feeling uncomfortable. So we're going to see, if they deal with that as the restorative in a restorative practice or some other way.
Cool. My other children are still hurt at the loss they endured, being ripped from their friends and favorite teachers. It shouldn't have had to be that way, but at least my son is alive. Children commit suicide at alarming rates from bullying every single day. Please start holding yourselves to a higher standard of care, Mr. Boswell. If students truly do come first, then do better. Thank you.
So that's her calling out Mr. Boswell, who apparently had something to do with her situation, but failed to, let's say, take the appropriate steps to solve the problem. Sounds like he also gave her some lip service. Let's just take a pause to look at them. Because that's how they should look. I mean, at least there's something in there. They know that they've just been all called out, about as bad as somebody can be called out as an adult for a complete failure to do their job. I don't see Posley in the picture anywhere. He's not leaning in. All right. Now we're going to have a little support here from the peanut gallery that you won't be able to hear, but I'll be happy
Madam
to do
Chair,
that.
that completes the public testimony.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And for speakers that did not get a chance to finish their words, please feel free to email those to us if there's anything else that you would want for us to ensure we read. And for Ms. Hansen's already here of what happened to your child. No, I'm saying, I'm sorry to hear that this.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I will make sure that board.
So, what's going on right now is they're trying to make a statement of empathy, and Jackie Mann is interrupting her. She's not called on by the chair. There's no point of order. She's not recognized. It's just outrageous. And she's going to get laughed at. It's going to be hard to hear, but she's about to be laughed at, and then she's going to be quiet.
Members get the testimony that was passed out tonight.
There it is.
Yes, and I'm saying I'm sorry that that happened. Just acknowledging your words.
Well, I mean, that's at least democracy in action there. She makes a ridiculous move to try to, protect her board from admitting any liability or making statements of empathy or however you want to do it, admitting certainly that they had contact with her, this person's parents, and didn't do what they said they were going to do. We can't have that. But thank goodness that she at least had the self-awareness to know that she was being laughed at because her actions were ridiculous and stopped. So that's something.
That you shared with us today. All right.
And that's her.
Well, thank you for that.
So she's saying she would have appreciated your response a year ago when I asked you, but you didn't respond. And what do we get from Garcia? Is moving right along.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item number 2, an update with possible action on the development of school-based plans to reduce chronic disruption and suspensions. This is an...
All right, well, there you have it, folks. It's the. Let's just see if we can see their faces
informational
anymore.
item, although it has been noticed.
I mean, it
for
takes
possible
some
action.
absolute
No action is
ability to
required.
compartmentalize to go from they're getting called out to that to there.
Would the
That
administration
you all
please
should
present
look
item?
and feel
Chair
that
Garcia
way.
and members of the committee,
You
in
absolutely
September of
should.
2022,
Trying to
the
move
board directed
along as
administration
if
to develop
you
a pilot
didn't
plan
do
addressing
anything,
disproportionality
and you
by
don't know what the heck's
by
going on, and
targeting
pretending
chronic
like you don't
disruption,
know.
suspensions,
This
in 3
deliberate
schools,
ignorance here.
that are
You ought to
amongst
be
those with
ashamed
the
of
highest
yourself.
suspension rates.
Bob Peterson, most of all, you know better. You know exactly what happened. You know what's happening, if not in this case. You certainly know what's happening. That what she's alleging is the kind of thing that's happened. So it seemed to me that she called out Bob Peterson. She certainly called out directly by name Director Leonard. And Mr. Boswell. So we know that those people here. Mr. Boswell's looking a little uncomfortable there, isn't he? That's sitting next to Mr. Chasen there. So, these people certainly are capable of internalizing the message here. Acting on it, though, does seem to be a different matter. So, there's a lot more to look at here, but I think for now, we'll stop. So thank you very much. Stick with us. We'll keep you informed.